Namaskar. This is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. It would be no exaggeration to state that every large corporate fraud has had the support and involvement of the statutory auditor, without which such frauds could not have occurred. The auditors were either active participants in the frauds and did not report them, or they were incompetent and negligent, which is often not the case. After all, chartered accountants are a highly trained lot. The promoter directors are generally the prime beneficiaries and culprits in these crimes, and they obviously deserve the strictest punishment when they cheat the shareholders, when they cheat the lenders, and of course, when they dupe the government. But it is the auditors too who must be strictly punished, because they are appointed to keep a check on the management and report their misdeeds, if any. And it is they who betray this trust reposed on them for their sheer personal greed, personal ambition, and therefore also become the prime accomplice in these scams, in our opinion. These frauds get committed and perpetrated only because the auditors falsely certify the financial statements as what we call true and fair. And these very frauds could have been prevented had the auditors decided not to dilute their integrity and their ethics, which is what they do whenever these kind of large-scale frauds take place. The fact is that apart from certifying the financial statements of a company as true and fair, or otherwise, in case they are not true and fair, the auditors also certify a host of other things, which include proper utilization of funds raised from banks and from the public, defaults, if any, in repayment of borrowings, genuineness of transactions with related parties, frauds that may have taken place, control systems of the company, corporate governance, veracity of investments made and loans given, unpaid statutory liabilities, contingent liabilities, etc. They have a wide reporting responsibility. And it is for this reason that the auditors have a complete and unconditional access to the entire books of accounts and supporting records and documents, etc. of a company. When you look at the wide-ranging rights and responsibilities of the auditors, you cannot help but conclude that they were in the know of things and are thus equally guilty when large-scale frauds take place, and they are perpetrated for many years, all because of the involvement of the auditors. This position of the auditors has been revealed in numerous frauds, and the latest case where the criminal spotlight is on the statutory auditors for a huge corporate fraud is that of CG Power, the Thapar Group company, at the center of over 5,000 crore rupees fraud. With the State Bank of India now filing a criminal complaint with the CBI against three former statutory auditors of CG Power, which is firms called Sharp & Tandon, Chaturvedi and Shah, and Mankeshwar and Company, the dubious role of these three audit firms has finally come in focus. It is finally out in the open. The giant scam broke out sometime in August 2019 when its promoter Gautam Thapar was thrown out by the board of directors of the company on charges of fraud, on charges of siphoning of funds, forgery, etc. Since then, the agencies like SFIO, CBI, Enforcement Directorate, etc. have investigated and interrogated the company promoters, the directors, the executives, and the lenders. But surprisingly, that was not the case with the auditors. Their prosecution should have been among the first to commence, according to us. After all, the auditors were required to know it all, and they did know it all, but they yet kept quiet and certified the financial statements of CG Power as true and fair, thus hoodwinking the lenders to the company in a big way. And the accomplice to this giant crime was not just one audit firm, but there were three well-known and influential homegrown Indian chartered accountant firms, which maybe explains why the investigation agencies and the lenders led by State Bank of India also did not immediately initiate any criminal or prosecution action against them in 2019 itself, when this fraud was unearthed. The frauds committed by Gautam Thapar and CG Power were humongous, and they took place between 2014 to 2019. it went on for 5 years. The amount that they siphoned away through various illegal modes is about 5,300 crore rupees. The CBI has so far charged Gautam Thapar in a banking fraud of 466 crores, alleging criminal conspiracy, breach of trust, cheating and forgery for diversion of public money, and it has now charged him in yet another banking fraud of 2,453 crores involving 12 banks led by State Bank of India, where the bank funds were directed through bogus related party transactions and such means. The money went out of the system. And all this involved misrepresentation and false books of accounts, entries and vouchers and bogus financial statements, providing false, incorrect or misleading information to secure bank loans, which were then siphoned away to other companies through a series of transfers. All these scammy transactions, all these bogus entries were recorded and transacted through the books of accounts of CG Power, to which the auditors had complete access, and they yet certified these falsities to be true and fair. For not reporting and raising the red flags that they were expected to, the auditors were handsomely rewarded through professional fees of dozens of crores of rupees. And what was it? Apart from the large audit fees, they were also paid huge fees for non-audit services, all to buy their silence and not report the criminal misdeeds of the promoters of the company and the management along with him. These auditors, therefore, did not cooperate with the forensic auditors also who were appointed by State Bank of India and were unable to even provide basic working papers to support the clean audit reports that they had issued to CG Power for years together, thus in effect concealing the management frauds for a long period of time. The entire conduct of these well-known audit firms has been enormously dubious in our opinion, and it gives rise to a number of issues which plague the audit profession, which plague banks today. The first issue it raises is the frauds that were committed in CG Power were blatant, huge, and were right on the surface, such that they could have been found out by even any ordinary auditor. They stared in the face of the auditor. The fact is that these three auditors are large and resourceful audit firms with extensive audit expertise that they claim to possess, and they still did not locate this, which is difficult to believe. It is therefore not possible that they were not aware of the dubious transactions involving about 5,000 crore rupees. The logical inference is that they were aware of the scammy dealings and deliberately chose not to report them. Such misconduct of large audit firms is nothing new, and it has been often found in many corporate frauds which have occupied headlines in recent years. The second issue, it is generally seen that frauds are unearthed. They are found out when a new audit firm is appointed by a company to replace an earlier one. The change of guard finds out the frauds. In this case, while the frauds began in 2014 and continued till 2019, Chaturvedi and Shah, who came on board in 2017, could have reported these malpractices which the earlier auditors had consciously not reported. However, they too did not do so, and they continue to remain silent about the frauds. To us, their connivance is a far more serious matter because they could have easily reported it. They came on board, hopefully, without a baggage. Interestingly, Ashwin Mankeshwar, the auditor, was on the board of Thapar group entities through which hundreds of crores of funds were siphoned away. He thus personally participated in the fraud that took place, in the siphoning of money that took place, by being aware of them and facilitating them too. It is obvious that he did not report the dubious transactions which were routed through companies where he was the director, and he thus is a prime culprit. The fourth point, the dozens of crores of fees paid to the auditors were the reason that they actually kept quiet. It raises a question on whether such services were even rendered by them to the company or not. The fees paid by the company appears to be plain and simple bribe to the auditors to buy their integrity and their independence. It is clear from the findings of the forensic auditor appointed by State Bank of India that the clean audit reports were unfounded and unjustified. The auditors did not even have the basic working papers to justify their reports by which they certify the financial statements of CG Power to be true and fair. This next point, apart from being a big failure of the auditors, even agencies like SEBI, ROC, etc., and the lenders to the company are to blame for not having spotted such huge frauds early in the day and letting them continue for many years. And finally, a question that remains unanswered is that when such a huge fraud took place in a listed entity and it clearly involved accounting and financial irregularities, then why was the criminal complaint against the auditors filed by State Bank of India after almost 2 years of the scam having been found? Whereas it should have been done, it should have been filed immediately. That is in August 2019 itself. Today we are in July 2021. Such frauds to us are a collective failure of numerous agencies and authorities to keep a check on the delinquent promoters, which include the independent directors, the key employees of the company, the registrar of companies, SEBI, rating agencies, etc. But it is the auditors where the blame lies the most, because unlike others, they have a full, complete and concurrent access to the books of accounts and records of the corporates. They also have a right to question anybody and everybody if need be, and they thus have the duty to report the true picture of the company to the shareholders and others in their audit report, which they do not, by betraying their integrity, of course for a consideration with the money or their personal ambitions. Certainly, it is important to take the strictest action against these former auditors of CG Power. After all, not only are thousands of crores of public money at stake, but also the very credibility of the system under which we are supposed to believe the audit reports which are issued by these kind of auditors also. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.